You need sales skills to find love. You need sales skills to convince your parents to get more pocket money. You need sales skills to convince your colleague to maybe pitch in for you. You need sales skills to maybe even convince your friend in the college. Okay, so let's talk about the most important skill required to start a business. If you want to be a successful businessman or a businesswoman, the most important skill, often ignored, often not taught in B schools, not taught in schools, it is actually a life skill. It's not even like a business skill. Any guesses for what I'm talking about? Sales, how to sell, sales skills. You need sales skills to find love. You need sales skills to convince your parents to get more pocket money. You need sales skills to convince your colleague to maybe pitch in for you. You need sales skills to maybe even convince your friend in the college to maybe put attendance for you. So sales skills is the most important skill, which is often ignored, unfortunately, by our education system. And the idea behind this short session is to sort of give you guys an idea of how you can sell and why is selling so bloody important. Now, let's try and break down sales. Oftentimes, people get very worried when they hear the term sales, because usually in corporate businesses, sales is associated with huge targets. It's target driven. People think it's a lot of stress. But ultimately, I'm going to try and give you guys like a very short framework which will make the whole process of selling very easy. Now, sales, to be a good salesperson, firstly, let's try and understand this. Nobody is a born salesman or a saleswoman. People often think, okay, it's a skill that he or she has. That's grossly incorrect. You can actually pick up sales. It's a skill that can be acquired. It is not just a skill that requires you to be a good communicator. There's much more to that than just being good at communication. Obviously, that helps, but let's delve deep in any case. So, let's assume you have a product or a service. Now, why is actually sales so important? Sales is so important because what are you chasing in a business? Ultimately, you want to make money, you want to drive revenue. And what is going to drive revenue? It is sales or it is selling, be it B2B or B2C. Ultimately, you need to be able to sell. Now, let's assume you have a product or a service, right? Becoming an expert about the product or the service is the most important thing in sales. Oftentimes what happens is a salesperson enters a business meeting, they don't have the kind of understanding that they ideally need to have about a product or a service. And when you're talking to a person who is an expert about that particular industry, about that particular product or service, then you're clean bowled, right? So you really need to have a very good idea of product or service. And let's understand a little bit about this. Now, the product or service can be divided into, let's say, macro and micro. Now, what is macro? Macro is the industry level. I'm not saying become an expert in that particular industry, but you need to be aware of what is happening in that industry. What is the market size? How big is this market? Right? And where does your product or service or your company fit into the scheme of things? And then you go to the micro. The micro is analyzing your own product, your own company. How do you stack up against competition, right? How is your product stacking up against, or your service stacking up against competition's product? What are all the options available for a customer? What is really important here is for you to be able to become an expert about your product or service, which means when you walk into a meeting, you need to be looked at like a subject matter expert. Why do you go to a doctor? Because you believe deep inside that the doctor is an expert and he or she will be able to help you. It's no different here. When you step into a business meeting, the person on the other side of the table should feel like you are the best expert. And if you don't give them that kind of confidence, then selling becomes very, very challenging and difficult. So this is one of the most important aspect. Now, the other important aspect that I'd like to talk about is selling is like dating. Now, what do I mean by this? Any idea?
You have to sell yourself when you're dating somebody also.
Partially, yes, but ultimately, this philosophy is, let's assume, when, let's say, a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old looking for love, right? If that person is desperate, what is the kind of signal that one is sending to the other person? The signal is of desperation, right? It means that, okay, hey, you know what, I'm unable to find anybody else, so which is why I'm putting all my energy into you. That will do the opposite of the outcome that you ideally want, which is you want that person to work with you, you want that person to fall in love with you. But what happens here is you're actually throwing off that person away. Yeah, that's a red flag, right? And that's extremely important, which means that you should never show desperation when you're selling. You can have whatever target, you can have zero money in your bank balance, you could maybe shut down shop tomorrow, but the minute you walk in to a business meeting, to a sales meeting, smelling of desperation, that is doomsday, right? So whatever is happening in your life, you need to put that aside. You need to walk in with confidence, right? Now, this is sort of like a game, right? So let's say you had a meeting, you went in, you pitched about your product or your service to, let's say, a key stakeholder of your prospect. A lot of salespeople, what they do is they immediately start following up. Sometimes even on the same day, sometimes the very next day, and that just reeks of desperation. Give them some time, let them understand people are busy. We need to understand that our prospects or your prospects get sold to on a daily basis, on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. There are zillions of people reaching out. Now you need to stand out. If you are doing everything that everybody else is doing, then how are you different? You need to be different. You have to create that differentiation, and only then will you be able to create an impact, right? So you would obviously fall in love with somebody who's created impact, right? So why would you want to fall in love with somebody who's not created impact? And therefore, this piece is absolutely the same as dating. There is absolutely no difference. Also, sales is all about pipeline management. Now, what is a pipeline? Pipeline is basically how many prospects, how many leads do you have that you're constantly pursuing. Similar to dating, not the best example, but let's assume you have 10 women or 10 men in your pipeline, right? Equate that with sales. Let's assume you have 10 prospects in your pipeline. The larger the pipeline, the lesser the chances of you being desperate. Let's say you put in all your energy into one person in the hope of love, and if that person is not responding, what happens? You just become extremely desperate, you become extremely disappointed. So the same logic you will have to apply here. So increase the size of your pipeline, reach out to more prospects, reach out to the entire universe, right? And then you will never be desperate. For example, let's say you've gone on day one, you have concluded a sales meeting with a prospect. Now, the question is, what is the ideal time for you to check or follow up? Now, this is a function of desperation, right? If you're, let's say, reaching out, you're desperate, you could feel desperate, but if you're reaching out in, let's say, 1 day or 2 days, then the signal that goes to the client is, okay, they probably need my business big time. They are probably desperate, and nobody wants to work with desperate people. So the best way to do this is wait for, let's say, about 3 days, or let's say a week. Do not follow up, and then you have to tell them, let's say, Ashrit, right? So, hey Ashrit, I finally got the chance to follow up with you, as opposed to saying, hi Ashrit, I just wanted to follow up. When you're saying I got the chance to follow up, you're sending a signal that, hey, you know what, buddy, I have a lot of things to do in my life, I have plenty of other prospects that I'm chasing, but I finally got the chance after a week. Which means that in terms of status, you're saying that, hey, you know what, I have a lot of important things to do. What I'm doing with you is also important, but it is not the most important thing. Does that make sense? Right? So the
And it
thing,
can also mean that it can also show that you're not interested. No? You're
it
waiting
is
for
a
like
it is a it is a thin line. It is a thin line. See,
it's an
uh,
urgent requirement
there
for
is,
you.
Yeah, there is. I mean, if it's an urgent requirement, then by all means follow up. But in the first meeting, usually there are no urgent requirements because you're trying to generate the need and the awareness in that prospect. Also, just as a side note, you also need to understand that your prospects are like kids, right? When I'm saying are like kids, I mean kids are actually very smart. They're probably babies. Your prospects are like babies, right? Which means they don't know what they really want. I'll explain what I mean by this. Now, why do they not know what they want? It could either be this case or they believe that they know everything. And they feel like, okay, hey, you know what? I don't need somebody to come and, sort of explain things and sell something to me. But ultimately, when you think of this, now let's assume you're cold calling somebody. When you cold call a prospect, they will 9 out of 10 times not give you the time because they don't know what they really want. And therefore, it is extremely important that you drive them to the outcome that you want, right? So you have to ultimately believe, and whatever they say, sometimes prospects might really shut the phone on your face. They might be extremely rude to you, right? They will not give you time, but you need to deeply believe. And that is where also dealing with rejection, in reality it is not rejection. Let's say there is a person that you believe needs help, right? Will you be the better mature person or will you become a stupid person? So you will try to be the more mature person because you know for a fact that that person needs help, right? So all your energy will be spent in trying to help that person. So you have to treat your prospect also like that, that you have to deep inside believe that they need help, right? And you cannot bring in your ego and you cannot take that as a rejection. In reality, it is not a rejection. A no is never a no. You have to devise ways to again circle back to them because you believe deep inside that they don't know jack shit and you know better than them. We discussed that earlier, right? So you have to be the subject matter expert. If you are the subject matter expert, by default you know better than your client, right, or your prospect. So do not take what they say that seriously at the beginning of the conversation. Always take it with a pinch of salt. And even if they're saying, hey, you know what, we don't have the need right now, it doesn't mean the door is closed forever. Also, the most important thing in sales is analysis. Now, what do I mean by analysis?
Understanding of product.
Yeah. So under analysis, you will have product or service, analysis of the prospect. Remember, you are like a doctor. You should be like a doctor, which means you need to understand what pain points your prospect has. What pain points are you actually going to solve through your product or service? If your product or service is not even able to solve the pain points, then what is the point of even barking up that tree? No point, right? So don't even go there. Now, analysis is by far one of the most important aspects of sales that people tend to ignore, right? So it is extremely important. You need to understand what pain points the customer has. For example, let's take the example of a duster, right? You're somebody who's going to be selling a duster. Now, what kind of analysis can we possibly do to be able to sell this duster effectively? So, what do I mean by analysis? Now, let's assume I have a company that is manufacturing these dusters, right? Now, it is very important to understand, and it's a product, and the product is a duster, right? So, who am I selling this to?
School teachers.
Okay, let's say school teachers, but am I selling it to school teachers? Am I selling it to school as an institution? School as an institution, right? But who's going to be using the duster? Teachers. So, which means I'm also selling to teachers. Why is that important?
The final consumers.
Will the institution have a pain point or will the school teacher have a pain point?
School teacher would have a pain point.
What could be the pain point for a school teacher?
Maybe this might produce dust that does can cause allergies.
Correct. Fair enough.
It
Now,
doesn't give a clear picture after you wipe
it's not
it.
wiping properly,
Yeah.
right? Now, what pain points could the institution have? Price, right?
Durability.
Exactly. So, we need to understand exactly for your prospect what are the pain points. Who is the ultimate decision maker? Who are the key influencers? This is very important. Now we've come to an understanding of that. Now we've understood, we made a list of all their pain points. Now the idea is to understand how does your product actually solve those pain points. Let's say you have pain point 1, pain point 2, and let's say pain point 3. Now will your product probably solve all the 3 pain points? Maybe yes, maybe not, right? But you need to have an understanding of where your strengths are, and that comes from self awareness and that comes from analysis. So stick to only that. And you don't have to solve for all the pain points. There is no product that solves for all the pain points, right? Okay, now you've understood, before you walk into a meeting, you understood their pain points, you understood who the key influencers are, you understood who the key decision makers are. Now you also need to understand a little bit about the background of who the teachers are, right? Of who the key decision makers are. In a country like India, you should go as deep as understanding what cultures do they come from, what ethnicity do they come from, what age group are there, and why is that so important?
That builds up a connection with them.
Exactly, because selling is, this is the most important one, which is point number 5. Selling is all about building relationships. This might sound very old school, but it is extremely relevant. People buy people. People do not buy products. People also buy products, but ultimately people only buy people. So how does one find out what pain points the school actually has? I mentioned earlier that you have to be like a doctor, right? Let's assume you go to a doctor without understanding where your injury is or without understanding where the treatment has to be done. No doctor will prescribe a medication, right? So the doctor asks a lot of questions. There are a lot of tests that are done. No different here, right? So you have to ask a lot of questions. In fact, asking the right question, okay, I'm just lazy to write. Asking the right question is the most important skill in sales. If you want the right answer, you need to be able to articulate the right question the right way. If you don't ask the right question, don't even expect the right answer. So what questions can you ask? So people think sales is all about convincing, but in reality, it's about asking the right questions. So when you go to a meeting, for example, ask them, are you happy with your current vendor who is supplying dusters to you? Right? What pain points? Exactly. Are you happy with the quality? Are you happy with the pricing? My duster not probably, my duster definitely solves. Let's say that the duster that they actually have right now is not wiping properly, right? And then let's say your duster has some eco-friendly, for example. Let's say it's more eco-friendly, and that is your moat, for example, right? And that becomes, you need to understand why their duster is not working properly, and then you need to pitch how your duster will solve for a pain point uh, that their current vendor is unable to solve for. Do a detailed questionnaire, like be a doctor, ask them a lot of questions, right? Talk to maybe 2 3 different teachers, and then you will have an understanding. And that is what is the analysis. The analysis requires you to work. You cannot be lazy here. The more information you have, the more confident you are in terms of approaching a new prospect, the more confident you are when you're walking into a business meeting. Without this, you will be a sitting duck. It has to be a conversation where you're actually asking them questions. You're trying to understand, where their business is. How does this duster actually solve any problems for them? Is it really such a big pain point for them, or do they at least care about it? If they don't even care about it, then you have to generate that care for them. Okay, why should you care about a duster? Maybe let's say our duster has some eco-friendly attribute, and then you bring in that attribute. Every product will have some attribute that you can actually sell. You need to understand what that attribute is. Every product is unique. There is no product that is absolute shit. Yes, maybe there are, but even that you should be able to sell. So understanding competition also is very important, and this comes under the market landscape that we spoke about some time back, right? So under the market landscape, you will have your competition, you will have market sizing, industry practices, and whatnot. So we discussed understanding your own product and service is by far the most important. Then selling is like dating. Do not be desperate. Number three is your prospects are like children. They're like babies. So you need to believe that they don't know much, right? Number four is analysis. Number five is selling is all about building relationships, especially in a B2B context, right? There are so many occasions where the person is actually not even concerned about the product, right? And also we need to understand, especially in the B2B context, um, I will take a slight different tangent into a bit of philosophy. But what we need to understand is a lot of people, let's say 90% of people, are unhappy in their jobs. Do we agree? Which means that people are vulnerable, people are insecure, people are also mildly, some of them more frustrated. Now, especially in the B2B context, you have a product. Let's assume in this duster case, right? You are eventually selling to a person. It's not a machine that is taking a decision, right? And people have emotions, right? Now they have baggages. So they will bring all that into the equation. They will have biases, right? And they will bring all that into the equation. Now, therefore, oftentimes people think relationship building is all about saying, hi, good morning, how are you? Hope you have a great day. Did you have coffee? No, that is all bullcrap. That is all small talk, right? But what you really need to do is to be able to establish a proper relationship. Now, how can you establish a proper relationship? You have to give value. Now, value doesn't mean you go and bring milk to them every morning, right? So, value means you have to understand them as a person. And this is where sales is also about psychology. I think I suck at spelling, so let's not even go there. Sales is all about understanding the person's psychology, understanding what their baggages are, and then you are so well better positioned to be able to give them value, right?
But how do you understand the person's psychology? Say you have only one phone call, and that lasts for some
No, phone call is very difficult to understand the person's psychology. Otherwise, what you can do is now we are living in the digital era. People leave digital footprints. You have to literally stalk them. Stalk them on LinkedIn, stalk them on Instagram, see what pages they're following, see where they've interacted. On LinkedIn, you can easily figure out. And then you should be able to build a persona of that person. I'm not saying your persona will be fully accurate, but at least you go somewhere. At least you have an understanding, okay, this person likes this person doesn't like that. It could be totally wrong when you meet the person, but at least there is some logical analysis before you go and meet a person. Like I keep saying, you should not be a sitting duck when you go and enter a meeting. Right? Okay, so giving value, and oftentimes it is very important to give value, and only then can you derive value, right? So figuring out how to give value is can be a book in itself, but we'll get to that later. But this is extremely important. Now the other piece is you have to be the driver. You cannot be the passenger. Now what is the difference?
Because you need to have full control. If you don't have control,
Exactly. I mean, you will never have full control, but you need to,
try and
get the
drive the
maximum.
yes,
conversation.
drive the conversation. That is extremely important. Now what happens is, for example, let's say you cold call a prospect, and the prospect says, hey, you know what, I'm traveling abroad for a month, right? Now also, sorry, on that point, the most important thing in sales is speed. How quickly you act, how quickly you're able to take decisions will determine everything in sales and in
But
business.
speed can also be misconstrued as desperation.
Okay, that is a good question. Now, here's the thing, right? So, it is always a thin line. When I'm saying desperation, it doesn't mean that you follow up after a certain duration. You can follow up every day. But if you're giving them value, is that really desperate? Maybe not. Right? For example, if you're
But
sending,
in our country, it's often seen as desperation if you respond soon or
I
get back to
would
somebody soon.
I would maybe beg to differ there, because I feel like if you're giving value, right? If you're giving value, if somebody has a really solid pain, you want to address that pain immediately, right?
Yeah.
right? So ultimately, it is all about value. Without value, if you're following up, if you're reaching out to them, if you're being desperate, then that is a different story. Also, it is all about tonality. Tonality is also very important.
What you say and how you say it.
What you say and how you say it. For example, let's assume that I am following up with a person, with a prospect, and I have called him today. I said, "Hi, whatever, Yashas, for example, I have this beautiful product for you. Can I just take a quick 30 minutes of your time?" Right? That is one way of doing it. Or the other way of doing it is, now, how is this? How is the tonality here? How would you guys rate it?
Yeah, it's
Normal? Normal,
normal and
right?
approachable.
Yeah, now the other person is calling. He's saying, "Hi, good morning. Is it a good time to talk? I have a beautiful product or a service for you. I would like to maybe get 30 minutes of your time. Could you please give me that time today, or can you give it to me tomorrow? Or have I called you at the wrong time? I hope this is not the wrong time." When you're saying stuff like this, it by default sends a signal to the person on the other end that this person who is calling is at a lower status than me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So as a human, you obviously want aspirational things. You want to connect to people who are at a higher status than you. Agreed? Nobody wants to connect. Status meaning not the typical status that we talk about in society, by the way. Status in terms of a perception. How is that person perceiving you? Now, let's flip this around. Let's say I've cold called somebody, right? I'm saying, "Hi, Yashas, how are you doing today? I am the best at what I do, or we are the best at what I do. We believe you have this and this, blah, 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 blah pain point. I actually have 30 minutes of my time today, or I can take out 30 minutes of my time tomorrow. Can you also take out that time? I believe I can address a big pain point for you," right? And then you give him a case study also in that particular call, like a quick case study. We worked with blah, 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 blah people to build credibility, right? And we've done this for them through a case study. Let's say you got about 2 minutes. Is that better than just saying, "Hey, you know what, give me 30 minutes later"? So that quick call that you're doing is all about value. You have given value to build credibility. You have given value to by giving a case study, which means you showing them how you solve pain points for an actual customer, and you have better tonality, or much more not desperate
Not desperate.
tonality,
Yeah.
which indicates to that person that this guy is an expert, or this person is an expert, right? And therefore, maybe I should listen to them. It is also about creating impact, which is why all salespeople must work on their communication, must work on their articulation,
Diction
must work on their diction, must work on their confidence, and that's it's a different ball game altogether. Let's not even go there right now. But coming back to this point, you have to be driving conversations. You have to make things happen, right? Doors are shut a lot of the time, but you have to break open the doors, and that is where you have to also be a doer. I genuinely feel, even if communication is not,
that
you're
great.
not best at communication, if you have all these things, if you're a subject matter expert,
Yeah.
if you're able to analyze, if you're able to put across your point neatly, you don't need to see. Oftentimes communication in India is equal to great English. That is not the matter here. Of course English helps. Now, why does it help? Because everybody in India is communicating in English in the professional work front. So knowing good English, being
Without
able to
judgment.
articulate, yes, knowing good English and being able to articulate is definitely a plus point. But let's assume for some reason your English is not good. You can still make up with all these things, right? People tend to ignore. As long as you're able to create impact, which means essentially, now what is impact? Let's try and understand that. Impact
You have
is
to make an impression on the person that you're talking to.
exactly. So let's say you say 100 words in a cold call or in a meeting, the person will only remember you for one word, or two words, or one thing. Let's say, I'm following, right? Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll seem like those spam calls that you
Exactly.
usually
Right. So
get
people
usually
should
have.
know you for one thing, and that is when you create impact. Now, if as a salesperson, if your pitch, your tonality, your content, everything is in line with what everybody else is saying, every other salesperson in A, B, C, D company is saying, how can you create impact? You can't create impact. So which means that you have to practice it. Like I keep saying, nobody is a born salesperson. It's all about practice, understanding product, and all of this structure that I've given here. And when you keep doing it over a period of time, like with anything else, like with any other skill, you will also learn it, you will also master it, right?